Yeah, okay, good morning, afternoon, and evening. It's the guy you should believe in. Dropping heat like every season. Underdog like Willie Beeman. Classic like
All
I'm singing.
I'm bringing
Blasting
you three different players in the NFL, trying to figure out who's having a better week, and they're all on the same team. I got
All right.
three Houston
Is
Texans.
this for fantasy, or is this what's the context of what we're trying to figure out?
Who's gonna have a better week fantasy wise, point wise?
Okay.
First up, Noah Brown, Houston
Okay.
Texans, number 85.
Houston
I'm pretty
Texans?
sure there's something wrong with his foot, isn't there?
No, that's
That's Nico Collins.
Nico Collins, but
Nico
he's
Collins.
back. But Noah Brown, he's played 5 games this year, 21 catches, 28 targets, 439 yards, only 1 touchdown, but he's had over 20 fantasy points 2 weeks in a row, last 2 weeks. Last week he had 7 catches, 172 yards versus the Bengals with no touchdowns, which I don't know how it's even possible to have 172 receiving yards and not accidentally stumble into the end zone. But anyway, then we have Tank Dell, number 3, Houston
The
Texans.
boy.
He's played in 8 games, 34 out of 57 receptions targets, 510 yards, 5 touchdowns, 3 games over 20 fantasy points this year. And the last week he had 6 catches for 14 targets, 56 yards, and a touchdown against the Bengals. Then last up, we have Nico Collins, who's coming off the injury. He was their number 1 receiver before he got hurt. He's played in 8 games as well, 36 catches, 2 more than Tank Dell, off of less targets, 53 targets, 631 yards, 4 touchdowns, and he had a 35-point game against Pittsburgh.
Are the Texans, what's for the levels for each of the receivers? Where are each of them getting majority of their targets from? Or are
I'm pretty sure Nico's not a slot. I'm pretty sure he gets long balls.
No, he's like the number 1 receiver. He's playing like their main outside receiver.
so he's 8+ yards deep.
Yeah,
Routes.
Tank's their slot guy.
Tank's their slot, but I think Noah Brown's been getting slot ones too because he's been getting like a lot of deep balls, I think.
So he's just been getting go wheels, deep slants. I'm gonna say Tank Dell. I think they're gonna focus on Nico coming back off that weak injury. Noah Brown he was in and out of the Dallas practice squad last year. So and he hasn't been good up until you said the last 2 weeks. He's had back-to-back good games.
Back-to-back 20 plus.
Yeah, I feel like it's Tank Dell, especially from a slot perspective. You're playing against the Cardinals, which is a pretty raggedy defense. You're going to be able to just slice and dice. They're going to be worried about, especially if Noah Brown's getting a lot of deep balls and needed long range. They're going to be worried about covering that up. And then Tank Dell should, I would, my guess is 7 for 80 and a touchdown.
I'm going to go Tank Dell as well, specifically because these last 4 to 5 games, he really has been that main target, and he has been getting more. He got 14 targets last game.
Yeah, that's crazy.
14 targets is crazy.
How many times did CJ Stroud throw last game? Do you know?
I don't know. I'm assuming 50 times though.
I bet it's in the 40s.
Yeah, 14
Bengals.
targets is
40,
crazy.
44.
He really does get majority of the balls thrown to him, and really, if he catches more than 7, that's even an even crazier game for him.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous game. If he has 10 catches on 14 targets instead,
yeah.
You're looking at 10 catches, 100 and some yards and a touchdown. You're looking at
that's
20 plus fantasy points.
20 plus fantasy
26,
points.
26 plus.
And I think that's just what they're moving into. I know Nico Collins was the one, but I think he got hurt and they kind of shifted the tank, and I don't know how that's going to work.
I still think. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't know how that's going to work with CJ shifting back to a number 1. I think he's picked his number 1. And he's going to stick with it.
I still think Nico's that number 1. I just think Tank Dell is, because and this is something that I've started to do with paying attention to with betting more so is like the NFL is the number ones are fantastic and they're great for those bad defenses, but it's your twos that win you games because the matchup is always going to be focused on the number one guy. And so it's your twos that win you games that then create, like, get your number one open. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
That win you games. So I still think that Nico is that one. Maybe he'll be a little slower coming off of an injury, but I still think Nico's that number one. I think Tank is that two. Similar kind of thing that we're watching in. I think it's a perfect comparison to Indy right now with Michael Pittman and Josh Downs. I think it's a perfect
Joshua
comparison.
Downs.
I think it's a perfect comparison.
Another comparison, but it just shows what happens when you don't have a good number two is Cincinnati, right? Jamar Chase got held to 10 fantasy points today because he doesn't have a number two.
I mean, also Joe Burrow went out in like the second quarter.
Yeah.
So,
and I think Boyd's a solid number two, to be honest. And I mean,
yeah.
T. Higgins as well, but T. Higgins is out. But
well, I mean, we saw it last game.
Held like 5 points in fantasy this week too. Like,
yeah. Well, it's hard when you lose your quarterback, and then you're just kind of. I mean, he played great. It's a good preview of what we're going to see this week, or not this week, but next week. But certainly not ideal for fantasy in any way.
Yeah, I'm going Tank. Noah Brown really isn't on my radar. He seems like a guy who can go off one week and then get 0 targets the next.
It's almost this is kind of funny, but it's almost kind of also like Dallas all over again because they're explosive and they have that guy. Like, obviously it's not the same caliber player, but like Nico is that CD, Tank is Brandon Cooks. And then Noah Brown's literally playing the exact same role as he was in Dallas.
No, I'd say like, he's Gallup right now.
Well, yeah, but I mean, last year that's what Noah Brown was doing.
Last year.
So like he's playing the exact same role as he was in Dallas. So it's almost like he's picking up the scraps, and then there's games where like someone's missing, or Dak was throwing the ball over the yard, or CJ in this case is throwing the ball over the yard, and he has a good game. But I agree. I think it's between Nico and I think Noah Brown's essentially an aberration.
Yeah. What do you think, Trev?
I think Tank Dell. I mean, when you look at him granted, Nico Collins was out last week, but for him to have 14 targets last week, like,
yeah.
So what we're figuring out is that there was a right answer to the question.
Did you find how many times they threw last week?
39.
So
CJ Stroud was 23 at 39.
So he's getting 30% of the target share. He got 30% of the target share last week. That's insane.
That is insane.
That's insane.
I mean, I think having Nico Collins will like level that out a little bit.
We're not even talking about Dalton Schultz as well, who he's also throwing the rock to.
Mm-hmm.
So getting 39 or whatever you said, 39%, right?
About 30%.
Yeah, getting 30% when you also have Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown, and then now Nico Collins, right? Being that number one guy who's getting all those receptions, it's only going to go down for the rest of them. Right, well, guy who's still getting 17 passes thrown to him is still going to get, like, if the heat goes down for him, he gets 10, gets 12 passes. That's still a lot.
I think the thing with Dalton Schultz is he is a good receiver, but I think the only real like number one targets when it comes to tight ends in the league are like you could argue are like TJ Hawkinson now and Kelsey. I think Dalton Schultz is still that relief guy that it's like security blanket. I don't know who, like, I don't have anyone to throw to, so I'm just going to toss it here. And then it's just dump and run, kind of thing. I don't know.
A lot of people,
yards after the catch.
A lot of people are saying that he might slide into that tight end one position towards the end of the year.
Well, he is. He's the only tight end really relevant there. It's more, what I'm saying is more so from a target share perspective, Dalton, like tight ends.
No, for the most part, he's ranked 7th in fantasy. That by the end of the year, he might be ranked number 1.
I don't think so. I would disagree with that.
Yeah, Travis Kelce's hard to beat, especially when you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league with no wide receiver core whatsoever.
I mean, there's so many other guys like Travis Kelce is that kind of guy. As I said, TJ Hawkinson is definitely that kind of guy. Dalton Kincaid has emerged as that guy in Buffalo.
I know,
and
bro.
should
All
continue
these
to.
names we're throwing out, they were all on my bench, and I dropped them all. I still have Tank Dell. I had Joshua Downs, dropped him. I had Dalton Kincaid, dropped him.
No, I
I'm just
picked
the
him up off
worst.
waivers.
Yeah, because I dropped him.
Oh, you didn't have him you had him earlier in the year?
Yeah, I drafted him.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. I've been considering it. He might be one of my keepers this year.
Yeah, you think so?
He
Think he's
might
gonna have
be.
a good year next year?
He might be one of my keepers. It depends on what happens once Dawson Knox comes back, but he might be one of my
Yeah.
keepers.
We could talk about that because we haven't reached our 10-minute mark. Talk about our 3 keepers for fantasy. I don't know what else we're going to talk about for this topic to get to 10.
Well, for yours, I think we're at 10 for this.
We are. So we got the video for that.
I think so. Trav, you're going. So final verdict. We're all clean sweep going Tank Dell as that guy that's going to be who's going to have the best fantasy week for them. And they're playing a Cardinals defense. So, I mean, that's why I'm like the Cardinals defense they're just, even if they try and lock onto one guy, it's the Cardinals defense we're talking about. So it's like,
yeah, they're gonna slaughter.
Well,
right.
the Texans should, I mean, kind of abuse him, and so there's no reason for them to force the ball to Nico if he's coming off an injury anyway. And
Yeah.
so I think Tank Dell. I honestly, I think it'll be. I think as far as like targets, it'll go Tank Dell, Nico, Noah. But I feel like Noah at the end of the day will probably have more catches and like a higher fantasy output than Nico this week, just because he's kind of like probably playing more of a number 2 this week, like a true number 2.
Could be. It's really going to be who's more productive in the first half, because the second half is going to be ground control offense. So it's really going to be who's going to have the most productive first half, I think, is what it comes down to.